Good evening, everyone. I call to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of Victoria for Monday, September 28th at 6:37 p.m. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, quick first thing is we've got some announcements. We kicked off our 2021 budget in June. The next budget workshop will be held on October 26th at 5 p.m. Notice that's a 5 p.m. start time. The budget discussion will focus on enterprise funds. On November 9th, a budget workshop to discuss capital funds will take place, also starting at 5 p.m. The council is scheduled to wrap up the 2021 budget process and adopt the 2021 budget and tax levy on December 14th at 6:30 p.m. at the regular meeting of the City Council. All budget meetings are open to the public for input and comment. At the October 26th workshop, which begins at 5, council will also discuss utility undergrounding and related long-term plan and policy. During the November 9 workshop, council will also discuss stormwater utility rate study findings and recommendations. Again, this workshop begins at 5. There will be a special meeting of the City Council on Thursday, November 12th at noon to canvass the general election results, and that meeting usually lasts, Dana, what, 5-10 minutes? It's just. That's correct. Okay, so, and that will, the only thing that will be discussed at that special meeting will be the canvassing of the election results, no other city business. There will be a workshop on November 23rd at 5:30 p.m. to discuss our land trust lot fund and affordable housing. All meetings of the City Council take place here at the City Hall and the council chambers unless otherwise noted. Last two items. National Night Out is typically held in August, but has been rescheduled to Tuesday, October 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. Our first responders will be out and about visiting registered parties via a fire truck parade. Lastly, our fall residential yard waste event will be held on Saturday and Sunday, October 16th and 17th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Residents should bring their licenses and can drop off yard waste at the old Public Works building off Steiger Lake Lane during this time. Dana, any other last minute announcements? Is that it?
None from staff, Mayor.
All right, thank you. With that, we've got open forum. Would you like to address? Okay, we have one person, and then there's, I do have something from a resident that I'll read as part of our open forum also. Jen, if you want to go first, name and address for the record, please.
Sounds great. All right, Jen Mulvihill, 5720 Marsh Lake Road. Well, I just want to thank you guys for being here tonight. We're nearing the end of the Marsh Lake Road project, and as residents, we're very pleased with how it's looking and how it's turning out, and we see that assessments are on the agenda tonight, and I just wanted to take a minute to touch on one part of the assessment process. If you look at the assessment roll that's in the packet for tonight that lists the names of the people who will be assessed for the Marsh Lake Road project, you'll see that nobody on the south side of Marsh Lake Road is slated to be assessed for the project. And this is different from what was noted to staff in the feasibility report when it was when the process was getting started. The reason is that the properties on the south side of Marsh Lake Road are in Laketown Township, and the city does not have the legal authority to assess properties on the south side of Marsh Lake Road. And I want to be clear to the council members, I've spoken with Kara Guerin on this and different city staff, that the city does not have the authority to assess anybody on the south side of Marsh Lake Road, either now or any time in the future, including at the time of assessment. So I think that in the past that was unclear about, or excuse me, at the time of annexation. So if properties on the south side of Marsh Lake Road are annexed in the future, the city does not have the legal authority to assess them. And the reason is that those properties are not noted in the assessment reel. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. The end result is that because Green Acres comes into play for different properties, only 5 property owners along the whole corridor are slated to be assessed for the project. So as one of the 5, we really see that as being unfair. It's absolutely unfair that the city would do the project and only assess 5 residents for the project. So we just asked tonight on behalf of those whose names are on the assessment reel who are not a part of Green Acres, that the city would take a fair approach to the way they are applying assessments here and not assess residents along Marsh Lake Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're saying that we shouldn't double your assessments to make up for the others? Thank you, Jen. I do have a letter from the Schmigs, and I'd like to personally express my condolences on behalf of the city and the city council. For those that don't know, Julia Schmig lost her mom recently, and as a result couldn't be here tonight, so they sent this letter in. So, Julia, to you and your family, our hearts go out to you. This is a letter that she sent in, and I quote, thank you for this opportunity to once again present our perspective on the topic of the Marsh Lake Road Improvement Project. It's been a long road that we have been on together, even though Marsh Lake Road is only 1.5 miles long. The Schmig family farm would like to thank this council for the important decisions made in July of 2019 when you voted to explore options beyond a big, fast county road, and then again in December of 2019 when you authorized design for a smaller city road. And here we are now, September 2020. The new road is built. Our beloved century-old spruce trees are still standing, and the calves can graze in their pen alongside the road. My family, especially my dad, can continue to enjoy sitting on the front porch because cars are not whizzing by at 55 miles an hour. Instead, it'll be a more leisurely 30 or 35 miles per hour, well suited for the picturesque countryside we live in. My family appreciates all that this council has done in making these pivotal decisions, and now you have a pivotal decision to make regarding assessments. We know that this is another difficult decision, and there are several things from our perspective that we would like the council to take into consideration. As we have shared with this council before, the question of assessments is always a challenging one. Based on the last published numbers, we have access to the calculation of estimated assessments from the April 2020 Marsh Lake Road Improvements Feasibility Report applied a formula to arrive at an assumed special benefit. For our farmland on both sides of the road, that applied formula resulted in an estimated assessment of $112,000 for a paved road that creates no benefit for farming. In reality, it imposes a negative element for farming as a paved road will increase traffic volume, making it harder for us to access our fields and more hazardous for us as we drive up and down the road with our farm machinery. Compound that with the city's interpretation of the Green Acres statute that the entire assessment is due at bond maturity, that alone could force a family farm out of farming. If the council moves forward with assessing for this project, know that it will likely lead to litigation this fall contesting what we would deem to be an excessive assessment. What is also challenging for this council is to blame Victoria's rural elements and appeal in the midst of growth. While we understand the need for the road to be paved, at the same time, we did not ask for it to be paved. To then be asked to pay such a large portion of the cost for an improvement that offers no benefit for farming places a disproportionate burden on us. This road was paved to benefit the residents of the growing community of Victoria, and it is the benefit of the rural appeal of this unique corridor that is driving that growth. Another challenge for the city with this project is the fact that this city does not have jurisdiction to assess on the south side of the road, and Laketown Township has no interest in applying assessments. There are compelling reasons for the city to do likewise. Looking back on the project history and evolution of outcomes, had it not been in large part due to the countless hours the residents of Marsh Lake Road poured into this topic over the past 6 years, the city would have spent millions on a county design that would have been a total overbuild at the expense of other critical infrastructure projects for Victoria. In a sense, it is the city that has received a special benefit from us, that benefit being the collective and collaborative effort of the neighbors along Marsh Lake Road who, after a multitude of meetings at all levels of city, township, county, and state government, coupled with volumes of research and articulation, surfaced an alternative option for the road design that ultimately prevailed saving the city more than $1 million on this project, while at the same time freeing up state aid dollars for other critical projects that will have greater impact and benefit for the taxpayers of Victoria and the entire community. And I do want to note that Julia Schmig included a footnote as to where that $1 million comes from. It's in the letter that's in the packet. Going back to her letter, every challenge presents an opportunity with the Marsh Lake Road project and all it encompasses. This council has an opportunity to look through a new lens focusing on greater scope of benefit. A fresh perspective offers compelling reasons to look at the options beyond assessments for a paved Marsh Lake Road that will now be traveled by many in the community as it connects Victoria's rural appeal with residential growth. And that concludes the letter. Her footnote is available for those that want to read it. With that, is there any other open comments or comments rather for open forum? Alyssa, did we get anything else sent in?
Mayor, we do not.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's move on to the agenda. Council, can I get actually, we already know that there's one emergency item that we had added. So when I asked for the agenda, let's include this. Dana, if you would, for the public, can you explain what's going on? And Bob, I'd like you to weigh in and confirm that there's no open meeting law issue here, please. Dana, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this evening, we have an emergency item that we would like to add, and that is related to our CARES Act funding and the renovation project that we had proposed moving forward with, and council gave consensus on at our last workshop to begin the City Hall construction project. And so with that, this evening, as we were meeting, we did receive a letter. During our workshop, we did receive an award letter recommendation from Wold, the architects that we're working with. And I'll just summarize. We sent our plans that we discussed at our last workshop to 4 different contractors. We received bids from 3. We had budgeted $174,000 for this project. One of the bids was over that estimate, and so we threw that bid out. And by bid, I mean quotes. So the remaining 2 quotes were carefully reviewed and considered. Both were well qualified or are well qualified to perform the work and have indicated their ability to meet our timelines. As you know, we have to have the work completed and everything paid for by November 15th. And before that, because we're using this council chambers for one of our polling locations, both were or are local to the metro area and have completed projects for municipalities of similar size and scope. So before you this evening is an award letter, which is a recommendation to award the contract to Parco's Construction, who was the low quote, coming in at $150,800. And so the emergency item for you to consider tonight, or the action that staff would be asking you to consider, would be to accept that quote and award the contract to Parco's Construction of West St. Paul.
And for the public's benefit, this needs to be done quickly because of the timing on the funds, and that correct?
That is correct. And Mayor, and for any member of the public who might be watching that did not tune in to our last workshop, council did authorize and delegate authority to me as the city manager to move forward with the project and sign the contract so we could begin the work given the timelines and bring back the contract for review. But since we had that information to us tonight and we're meeting, we felt like it would be an appropriate action for council to consider it as an emergency item tonight, even though you had delegated that authority to staff.
All right, and so tonight the action is just accept this quote. That's all you're asking the council to do?
And award the contract.
And the council already gave you the permission to do that in the last meeting?
That is correct.
All right, sir. Bob, anything to add? We're fine.
Yeah, no, Mayor, the open meeting law does not prevent you from adding an item like this at the meeting. There, of course, as you know, are lots of laws governing certain things you do, that you have to send out notices and publish notices and hold hearings, and there are a lot of those things that we have to do. This is not one of those. So this is something you can add and act on tonight.
All right, thank you. So, council, if you would, if you don't have any objections, I'd like to move that we add this as item 6.0, take it up first in the regular agenda. Can I get a second to that?
Second.
Any further discussion about adding this? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that item is now 6.0. We'll take that item up first when we get to the regular agenda. So with that, I'll ask the council for a motion to approve the amended agenda, please.
Make a motion, we approve the amended agenda.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any other agenda items? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the amended agenda is adopted unanimously. Next up is the consent agenda. Is there anybody, first let me get a motion to approve the consent agenda from the council, please.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Anybody any discussion? Do we need to pull anything off the consent agenda? Seeing no hands, hearing nothing. All in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Consent agenda is approved unanimously. All right. Now we've got the first item 6.0. As we all heard Dana, we're being asked to, Dana, let me make sure I get this right, accept the low bid and approve awarding the contract, correct? That's the
Mayor,
action?
Staff would recommend that council accept the quote and award the contract to Parco's Construction.
Oh, there, I
West
see it.
St.
Okay,
Paul.
got it. All right. Council, is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
I will make a motion that we accept the quote and award the contract to Parco's Construction in West St. Paul.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, that item passes unanimously. Next up, Marsh Lake Road. Real quick, Dana, is this do I have to call for a public comment here?
No, Mayor, this is not a public hearing.
Okay. With that, who's got this one? Kara?
Mayor, members of the city council, I have my giant pointer here again to reference materials. But we are at the point in the process for this project where under the city's typical process for a road improvement project, as the project is approaching substantial completion, that's about the time typically, not always the case, but that the city council will then start to consider final assessments. So what you're being asked for to do tonight would be to approve a resolution declaring the cost to be assessed, ordering preparation of the proposed assessment, and calling for a hearing on the proposed assessment for the Marsh Lake Road Improvement Project. So essentially what you would be doing tonight would be saying, yes, we want to have a final assessment hearing. That would be held at the second meeting in October. That's the 26th, 28th, 26th? 26th. And you would send notice to all the affected property owners. They would be, invited to attend and provide feedback. What you have included in your packet is the upper half of the preliminary assessment roll that was included in the feasibility study. So this is cut from the feasibility study, but only includes the property owners on the north side of the road, so the properties that are within the current city limits. When you held the public improvement hearing, you had provided direction to staff to approach Laketown Township to see if they would be willing to consider assessing the property owners in Laketown Township for this project, because the city does not have the authority to assess property owners outside of the current city limits. The response that we got back from the town board was that they were not inclined to enter into such an agreement to assess those folks at that point in the process. So if we are moving forward to preparing the assessment roll, the official final assessment roll, it would only include these properties here listed on the screen here. The amounts here listed are the amounts that were based off of the feasibility level cost estimates, which at the time we were estimating the project costs to be about 2.12 million. Certainly, the city council could provide direction to reduce those assessments. If you recall, the bids came in significantly under budget at $1,724,000. So council could provide direction to staff tonight to reduce those assessments, consistent with the percentage that cost is coming in below the budget. Alternatively, you could wait to the final assessment hearing and decide at that point in time to reduce the assessments after receiving testimony from the public. But right now, the way the resolution is drafted, it does contemplate the total cost to be assessed at $171,000, which is the sum of, I'll get there, the assessments listed on this sheet. With that, I will take any questions that the council might have.
All right, thank you, Kara. Council, anybody who wants to go first?
I will.
Go ahead, Judy.
Back when we started with the assessment process, I didn't think that we should be assessing this stretch of road. And now that we know the south side of the road with Lake Town Township will not be assessed, and we have also learned that Green Acres, at the end of the loan, the 15 years, they are not required to pay that assessment until they have gone out of Green Acres, which we never know. We don't know when that would be. We have to eliminate that, which would be $41,300. Now we've dropped it down to $130,000, which by absorbing that, it's costing the taxpayers about $2.40 a year to cover this. And this is what we're doing this for the residents of the city, for transportation, for expansion. And I'm asking council to just finally end this so that we can move forward.
All right, thank you. Deb?
Yeah, I have some questions. So this assessment amount that's shown in the packet is based on the $2.12 million estimate.
Correct.
How would these assessment amounts change based on what was actually spent?
Well, the council would need to provide that direction of how we'd want to reduce them. If you recall, these assessments were calculated based on what we've done other assessments where we've said it's just 50% of the project costs are then assessed to the adjoining property owners. That's not what we did in this case because it would have exceeded the special benefit received by the improvement. It wouldn't have been fair and equitable. So we took a look at the 78th Street project, 78th and Cochia, and we used the unit that the residents along 78th Street each paid when we did that road. It was a paved substandard road that we improved to a 9-ton road, in that case with curb and gutter, and the property owners, both developed and undeveloped along that property, did pay a special assessment when we did that project. So we use that as our baseline for calculating the assessment. The city council could direct us to reduce this assessment by really whatever you thought would be appropriate. But it might make sense to look at the percentage under which the project came in at compared to what it was budgeted and, potentially apply that ratio to reduce the assessments. But that's all would need to be council direction because that's not specific to your current adopted policy.
Okay. And so this is we've already applied a different policy than the one we typically use.
Correct. Your
But we
policy
did that.
allows for discretion,
Yep.
but it is not the same 50% that we've applied for all the other residential neighborhood projects that have been done.
So knowing that, we could use our discretion to pick a different assessment amount.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm just looking at the city attorney.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, ultimately, your policy on assessments is a way for you to keep two sort of the same thinking process, same decision-making process, but ultimately the way you apply assessments on any given project is up to the council to decide. You're not, in other words, bound by your policy. You can always move away from it, and as Kara said, on this one, it made sense for you already to have moved away from it just as far as you've gotten in your thinking. It made sense to move away. You could move further away from the policy or use a different set of criteria to set a different assessment than your policy contemplates.
Okay, so this number that's demonstrated here is simply that. It's an application of a certain policy, but we could certainly defer from that and go with something different.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, the thing to always keep in mind, and I know we've talked about this a number of times in the past, but ultimately, the policy that your city has, which is very similar, frankly, to the policy that most cities have, the purpose for that policy is to assist the city in not imposing assessments that exceed the special benefit to a property. Again, that's a taking. That's a constitutional issue. If a city imposes an assessment for a road improvement or another public improvement where the value of the benefit to the property is exceeded by the amount of the benefit, that's an unconstitutional taking. So that's the real test here. And so cities adopt policies to avoid doing that. There are a lot of ways, though, frankly, that you can avoid doing that. One of them is just strictly sticking to your policy unless it doesn't work. Another way is to go and get an appraisal done on every property, on every project. No cities, or virtually no cities, do that because of the cost. Obviously, getting an appraisal done on each property for a project would be very, very cost prohibitive. So there are a number of ways you could do it. Applying a policy is one way, but the facts may push you away from that policy on a given project.
Okay, I'm gonna let someone else take a turn.
I'll take a turn.
Go ahead.
78th Street, what was the criteria for deciding which properties would be assessed? Because there are properties that are right on 78th Street, and then there are properties that don't have access to 78th Street.
So under the city's policy, if the driveway is coming off of the street that's being improved, they're assessed for the improvement. So as an example, the people on Lilac Circle or 77th Street Circle, they got assessed when we reconstructed that street. They didn't get assessed for 78th Street. But the undeveloped property along 78th Street was assessed. So at the time, was and still is the property owned by District 112. They received an assessment, and then the Llano Borough property, which became Whispering Hills, they also received an assessment that was subsequently paid by the developer through the deal they struck when they sold the land to the developer. The developer ended up paying the assessment on it. But yeah, so any property with a driveway or those undeveloped properties were all assessed for
So what
that
was the
project.
criteria for the assessment?
That one, so we used state aid dollars for that project. So we applied the city's state aid funds that were used to the project to the overall project cost. Now we didn't have enough state aid funds to cover 100% of the project costs. So the remaining project costs that weren't covered by state aid funds were split 50-50 per the city's policy between the property owners and the city. So 50% of the net costs were assessed, and that came out to a unit assessment of $11,100.
So the school district's property was assessed like it was a regular house?
It was assessed as if it had, I'd have to go back and pull the details of the feasibility study, but it didn't pay one unit. It paid 7 units or 7 times 11,100. I wouldn't want to be quoted specifically on those numbers. I certainly could have that information available for the city council at the final assessment hearing. It's a couple years back, so
Yeah.
when we did that
There's
project.
20 acres there, am I right?
That sounds right.
If I recall, a few years ago, we rebuilt Deer Run Drive, and the golf course had a disproportionate number of, it had a huge footage on that, on Deer Run Drive. Of course, the golf course doesn't use all of Deer Run Drive, so the city negotiated a reduced amount for the golf course. Is that something we've done before?
The number of units that the golf course paid was based on some set of criteria that I don't recall off the top of my head, that's information that I do have available to me that I could provide to you. But I do recall there being some back and forth discussion, because they had, they have property intermingled adjacent to the roadway all throughout that neighborhood. So they did pay an assessment based off some criteria that the city council determined that I could provide you for the hearing.
Further questions?
No, not at this point.
Tom G?
Okay, just a couple things. We've heard from a resident, I think from council, that the Green Acres portion won't have to pay even after the bond expires. Is that correct?
I'm going to direct that question to the city attorney, because I'm not qualified to answer it.
Yeah, so the backstory on that is that it's my view that the Green Acres law, and it's I think the view of all of the attorneys in my office, that the Green Acres law says, if you just read it literally, it says that special assessments, if your land is in Green Acres, are deferred but accruing interest. So deferred but accruing interest during the deferral period. And the deferral period only goes until the bond matures. So 15 years or whatever the bond period is. Read literally, there is a sentence in the statute that effectively says that. And our view is that means what it says, that at the end of the bond maturity, a person in Green Acres has to pay off the full amount of the special assessment plus interest. Ultimately, though, that decision, the decision about how Green Acres law is applied, is a county decision. Cities don't control that money. We don't control when a property comes out of Green Acres and must pay the special assessments. That's a county decision. We reached out because there was concern on this project from a couple of property owners. The view of two people in Carver County in the tax division is that that's not right, that a property that's in Green Acres remains in Green Acres even after the bonds mature, and will have the assessments deferred indefinitely, potentially forever, as long as the property remains in Green Acres. So it sort of doesn't matter what I think. Ultimately, it's the county's decision to make about how they're going to interpret that law. I will tell you anecdotally, not all counties take that view, but that's the view of Carver County. And so the net effect of that is, I think, where you're going, council member, which is a property that stays in Green Acres will, in Carver County, have special assessments deferred indefinitely until that property comes out of Green Acres.
And do we know if the Kelzer property is at Green Acres as well?
According to the county records, it is.
It is.
So
Okay.
assuming the county GIS online information is accurate, it lists the Kelzer property and the Schmieg property as being Green Acres.
And we heard from a resident that all the properties on the south side cannot be assessed today or any time in the future. Is that correct?
Mayor and council, and I heard that same comment, and maybe I'd ask a question before I answer a question. My understanding is that for the initial hearing, the hearing on whether or not you were going to do the project back months ago, all landowners on
Yes.
both sides were given notice. And that's the notice that's required in the statute in order to assess later. I will tell you, though, there is a question about how much of any assessment you don't apply today or wouldn't apply today because properties are outside of the city. It's unclear how much of that you could recover later when those properties are annexed in, even though they were given notice. And I don't think I want to get into the weeds about that. So that's a long way of saying, no, I didn't agree with what the resident said. I believe you've given the notice that you have to give in order to assess those properties at some point in the future. Whether a future council would do that and how much of the amount you would have assessed today but can't, how much of that you could assess later is in doubt. Let's put it that way. And last thing I would say, just because I haven't had a chance to say it before, there is something a little unusual about this project, and I think we all kind of sense that, and let's just say what that is. It's not typical where a city annexes property either by orderly annexation agreement or unilaterally by ordinance. It's not usual for the city to annex both sides of a road that's going to serve as a boundary road. The typical situation when a city expands into township and a road is going to form the boundary is for the city to annex to the center of the road, leaving one side of the road a township road, the other side of the road city road, and of course the net effect of that is what? The net effect is that any road improvements to that road have to be agreed on by the township and the city. So that wasn't the case here. The city annexed to the other side of the road, to the township side of the road. I don't know the backstory on that. It's possible that the city wanted to control the decision on when and how the road was going to be upgraded, and that would be a reason to annex both sides of the road. It's then a city road, and you decide. So that may have been the reason, but of course the net consequence of that is that you can't assess the other side of the road in the township. And so it's your road to maintain and your road to upgrade, but you can't assess half of, roughly speaking, half of the benefited property owners, half of the property owners that use the road. And again, I don't know the backstory on that, but that is unusual. That's not a typical situation that we find ourselves in.
So if I was a homeowner and I had a home on the south side and I wanted to sell that home, and under full disclosure, you would have to decide, you'd have to disclose whether or not there's an assessment pending. And we don't even know what that pending assessment might be. So that's odd. So we have a lot of exceptions here. And my final last question is, we've already bonded for this at 2.1, right? And we budgeted for that, correct?
We bonded at the 1.7. We waited to bond until we had bids back. So we bonded at the lower amount once we had the bids back.
Oh, we did. But we've budgeted, was it in our budget at 2.1?
Yes.
Mayor, members of the council, so when we went to bond, we took the most up-to-date budget numbers that we had, which was the 1.7. So we only bonded for what we expected to use on the project. So that became our budget.
So the levy has a lower number. The debt
Right,
service
so-
levy will be based on the actual,
Exactly. So
Amount.
there's not extra.
there's not extra money flowing in.
No, we only planned for what we felt we needed at the time of the.
So have we budgeted that this 171,000 is going to come into our budget?
That's correct. It would affect, it would lower the levy for us to have, a lesser amount to put towards that.
And the existing levy budget that's being used in the tax number, it assumes this assessment.
It is, yes. So, as of right now, that would move the needle on the levy, yes.
So if we didn't assess, we'd have to raise our budget?
Right now, I put in for the long-term financial plan and the 2021 budget, I put in for the entire amount to, not considering an assessment, not knowing what you were going to decide on the assessment. I went the conservative route,
Okay.
keeping the full amount under the taxpayers, under the levy. So it would lower the levy.
If we did
If you would
assess?
assess this project.
Gotcha.
Yes.
All right, I want to be clear here. I want to make sure I understood what I heard you say. You're not expecting this 171 to come in,
Correct.
right? If the council chose to do an assessment, that would be, in essence, extra money that is not part or not included in the current budgeting process that we're in.
That's correct.
All right, so,
Just to note, though, they have 15 years to pay it, so it isn't like you get 171,000 next year. It's-
right, but the question was tied to this year's levy and
Right.
taxes, and I wanted to make sure, clear that it's not going to affect that.
Well, for max tax levy, we kept it at the highest bond payment to cover the entire amount.
But the effect of 1 year out of 15 on 171,000 is minuscule. So we're talking the discussion we don't even need to have.
All right, Councilmember Gregory, anything else to add?
No, that's all I needed.
All right, I'd like to add, I don't think there's any question that this is a unique situation. I don't think in the history of Victoria, we've ever done a road that's on the border of Victoria. Is that a correct statement?
We did do 86th Street. So 86th Street was on the border of Chaska. And that was another situation where we had annexed, well, we ended up annexing through the right-of-way because we wanted to improve the street, and Chaska wasn't interested in improving the street, so they allowed us to annex through the right-of-way. That project, all the properties on the north side weren't accessible under the city's assessment policy because they back up to the roadway, with the exception of Lions Park property that we could have assessed ourselves for. The developable property on the south side, so what became Cheval, that developer was charged their portion of the assessment when they made connection to the road. So that was just an agreement the city made with the developer at the time the development came in. So in exchange for granting them connection to the road within the city limits, they agreed to pay an assessment that would have been consistent with the city's assessment policy at the time. So
in the future, the city could do the same thing for any of those properties that choose to connect into the road and get developed.
correct.
All right.
I just want to make one point. We've had Councilmember Vogt made the comments, so we're talking about minuscule numbers. But isn't it typical when we do assessments, most people pay 100% upfront?
I would not say that's typical,
Not typical.
no.
Most roll it into their taxes?
To avoid, but to avoid,
It also depends on the size of the assessment. If you get an assessment where we did that one year where some of them were like $900, yes, we saw a lot of people that just came in and paid those. But when you're talking, anything over probably like the $4,000 or $5,000 mark, you're going to have more people that are going to have it put on their taxes.
and they stretch it out over 15 years?
They do, yes.
Okay, I guess I've always just paid them upfront, but
Right.
maybe that's just me.
I'm sorry, I still pay it on mine.
Okay.
So I'm not in favor of assessment. I think there's too many unique characteristics here. The combination of asking 5 Victoria homeowners to pay for this when everybody else doesn't get assessed. We did try to reach out to Lake Town Township. They clearly weren't interested in partnering with us on this. You've got a lot of people on the west end, and they shouldn't be assessed either by policy because they don't connect to the road. They all back to the road, yet all of those people are getting the advantage. I think everybody has to pay their assessments, but this situation to me is so unique in what has happened here, and I think this will become a county road at some point. This was nothing more than a stopgap measure. So I'm just not in favor of doing assessments. I just don't think that it's fair to ask 5 or 6 residents to pay for basically the rest of the city. And by the time we get done, and if we ended up going into litigation, this 171, first off, is based on the 2.1 million, give or take. So that number is already lower. We already know there's some properties in here in Green Acres, so those numbers completely come out. By the time we're done, we're talking a much smaller piece of the 2.1 million. And to me, it just doesn't feel right. So I don't think I'm going to support assessing these properties. And we can, Bob, in your opinion, we're not opening up the city to, you can always get sued for anything, but because this is so unique and some of the characteristics, that we'd be okay if we chose not to assess?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, even if this road were just like the other developments where you have assessed, you wouldn't be opening yourself up to that. And I think Councilmember Black in the past has sort of made the argument that this, apart from the other distinctions you just made, this road is not the same as some of the quieter residential streets that you've assessed for in the past. And so that's another distinction that I think you could make between this and others. So again, long-winded answer, but no, you're not setting a precedent that would either impact looking backwards or stop
Putting
in the
the
future.
city in danger in the future?
No.
Okay, so other discussions, council?
Do we have any other choices? Can we annex? Can we go to the other side and annex?
You just want that one.
Well, no, It's important to me that we apply this fairly, and there's no question that this is a kooky situation. It's just, there's a lot of really strange things about this particular road, and it's been very strange since the beginning. I mean, if this was the county road, we wouldn't even be talking about this. They'd be applying their policy and see you later.
Or if in past history, the city didn't agree to take over the entire roadway, which is
Right.
unusual in and of
Right.
itself.
Exactly. So I'm just wondering, because this is such a strange situation, do we have other options? I mean, and I think for me, I'd like to explore what are those options and how do we make this, fair and equitable is a big deal. And, Judy's paid for her street, I've paid for my street, you've paid for your street, now we're going to pay for this street too. So I think there's.
The entire city's going to pay for that street.
Understood, Judy. Yeah, I understand. But I'm wondering, are there other options? Can we annex? Can we get some help from the county? We know the township isn't interested, but, do we have an option with the county? What are our other options? Are there any other things in our?
Mayor and council, maybe the only piece of that I can really speak to, council member, is the annexation piece. Maybe others in the room have other ideas. I'm not paid to think too far outside of the box. But as to annexation, of course, we've recently now gotten a new annexation agreement with the township. And under that agreement, two things are important to think about. One is that cities have unilateral authority to annex without township consent, but that's very acreage limited. We can only annex about 100 acres, not about 100 acres. And that wouldn't be enough in this case, as I understand it, to cover all of the south side. And regardless of that, the agreement we now have says we're only going to use the orderly annexation agreement. We're not going to go off and do this unilaterally. And under the orderly annexation agreement, at least indirectly, the landowners have to be consenting to and participating in the annexation. We can't do it over their objection. And the reason for that is, of course, I don't want to dig up the old argument, but we're not going to pay the township to annex property. The statute doesn't contemplate that. And so they want to be paid, the last we heard, $500 an acre to allow annexations. The landowner's going to have to pay that, and of course, if they're unwilling to pay that, then the annexation won't occur because the township under the agreement is entitled to that payment. So, again, long-winded way of saying I think we need the landowner's consent agreement to annex. And so I don't see a way that the city can sort of unilaterally push annexation of those properties.
Okay. Then my next question would be, if we assess these properties and that assessment becomes due at the time of sale of the property, what kind of problem does that create for the folks who are trying to sell the property? So, is this, to Councilmember Gregory's point about, you probably have to disclose that there's an assessment pending on the property, correct?
Mayor and council, as to the properties in the township, I guess if you just plowed forward from the point we're at now, I don't know that would be deemed what's called a pending assessment. And I should say, pending assessments, there isn't a statutory phrase that refers to pending assessments. That's a real estate market-driven thing. And so, but I don't think where we're at this point would constitute a pending assessment against the properties on the south side. As to the properties that are in Green Acres on the north side, you're quite right that two of the triggers for coming out of Green Acres would be the sale of the property or ceasing the farming of the property. Either of those things would trigger the assessments from being due. And yes, certainly those properties, the assessments would appear on the tax rolls. That would be something that the landowners would have to acknowledge, admit, put up front if they were trying to market and sell those properties. And so, yes, that would be a known part of the transaction. And then as to what impact, putting aside all the facts here, what impact do pending assessments or assessments that need to be disclosed have on the sale of property? It's out of my, again, above my pay grade, but I'll tell you what I see just as an anecdotal matter. If you're talking about a fairly significant piece of property, the impact is really not very great. Development properties are bought and sold on bigger picture issues than pending special assessments. There are bigger dollar things in play than those, and so they don't really impact those transactions very much.
Oh, one other question that I have. The Green Acres, we know that while that assessment is pending, interest is accruing. Does that interest only accrue for the 15 years, or does it continue to accrue until such time that assessment is paid?
Well, so Mayor and Council Member, I have to concede again, the county takes a view that I don't agree with. So you're asking me, I think, what the county's view is that, again, I don't agree with. But I think it would be really hard for them to be taking the view that you're in Green Acres indefinitely and you only owe the special assessments when you come out, but your interest is cut off after 15 years. I mean, that really wouldn't make sense. I already don't agree, again, with their opinion, but that really wouldn't jibe with the statute at all. So I think their view must be that as long as you're in Green Acres, you don't have to pay the special assessment, but the interest continues to accrue. And so if you're in it for 100 years, you're going to owe the $20,000 assessment plus X dollars.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bigger number than the principal. The interest will be much more than the principal after 100 years.
Yeah,
so
certainly.
that would have to be their position, I think.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Counselor, you say the county's view, and it's a couple people at the county
Yes.
in the tax area. So those people will come and go. So in 10 years, the viewpoint could be completely different. Does that change anything?
Yeah, and Mayor and Council,
If we assessed it now, right now it looks like it's harmless, but it could change.
yeah. Well, Mayor and Council, I don't mean to cast aspersions by saying it's two people in the counties. That it may be not the right way to say it, so I take that back. But I wasn't made aware, and I don't think staff was made aware when we reached out to the county, that there is sort of a written policy about this, or that they have interpreted the statute previously and they could point to an example where there is a property in Green Acres subject to a special assessment that has gone beyond the bond maturity date. I mean, they didn't point out any examples from Carver County where that has occurred before. So that's all I meant by saying we've heard from a couple of folks in the department that that's their understanding. How deep that runs, whether that's an official sort of county documented position or not, I don't know. And I don't know if you polled the counties around the state, I don't know if that, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's just a vast majority of counties take that view. I know that that's not a uniformly held position by all counties, so.
Thank you.
Just a couple things. I came in here tonight thinking that, fair is fair. We've assessed everybody else. We built Steiger Lake Lane. We built 78th Street. Those people all got assessed. But I learned a lot here tonight. I learned we really got a mess here. If I were to purchase one of these homes on the south side and the owner didn't tell me anything about any pending assessment, which the attorney said he wouldn't have to disclose that, and 10 years later I got a bill for $12,000 plus interest, that would be a problem for one of those homeowners. That's exactly what you said could happen in this case.
Just to clarify, only if they requested annexation.
Right,
So it would
but
be
I'm
through
saying-
the annexation agreement that you would be, talking with the property. The property that comes to mind for me is the meat cutters property, so
Right,
the,
and those are large ones.
Right.
Which is what the attorney said, but we do have 3 homeowners on the south side, three separate
Right.
homes that are not large parcels. So.
they would have to
and
petition for
chances are
annexation.
they're going
though.
to be annexed when everybody's annexed. I don't think you can just say, well, we're just going to do this one home, but we're not going to do the home in the middle. Or I don't think that's going to happen. That's just my personal. But anyways, long story short, I learned a lot here tonight, and I'm not going to vote to move forward with a public hearing.
So no assessment?
No assessment.
All right, so that's 3 of us that aren't in favor of an assessment. Deb, do you have a position one way or the other on this?
I have to agree, this is mighty messy. It's mighty messy, and in order to figure out how to do this in a fair and equitable way that doesn't cause all kinds of heartburn, I can't come up with it. We've got a million options and none of them are good, in my mind.
Right, and I think this, I don't think it was done intentionally, but when the city annexed the entire roadway, it set this up.
Indeed.
And we kind of inherited it. So, council member vote, anything to add?
I pretty much come to the same conclusion you all have. It's, trying to work this out is, it'd make us go in circles. So,
All right,
and that amount we're talking about is a smaller number than 170,000, probably
much smaller.
80% of it to start with. And then you throw green acres out. So we're talking about fighting over 100,000.
If that, the sidewalk. We're fighting over sidewalk.
Right, and
Now we can't do the sidewalk on Greengrass.
remember, that's not $100,000 now, that's $100,000 over 15 years in small payments.
So, yeah.
All right, so with that, council, can I get a motion from someone?
I don't know how to say it. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward without an assessment. Does that work?
Without objection, can we do this? I move that we move forward with Marsh Lake Road and proceed without assessing any of the homeowners or landowners along the entire road. Does that work? I hate doing these on the fly, but
Yeah, Mayor and Council, theoretically, you wouldn't have to do anything. You could just move on and not adopt this. But if you
Oh, so
want
we
to
don't
be
need a
more, if
motion?
you want to be more, if you want to be more permanent about it, either of your motions work. So,
Yeah.
yep.
all right, so I'll withdraw mine if either one works. Judy, we have a valid motion. Council, can I get a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion, council? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. We're not going to assess Marsh Lake Road. All right, next, we're moving on to 6.2. Kara, is this you or is this Dana?
Nope, that's me. Back to the giant pointer. Okay, Mayor, members of the City Council, this item relates to property adjacent to the city's Public Works facility. I will try to zoom in here. So the city's Public Works facility is located here on Bavaria Road, adjacent to Hartman Tree Farm. And at the time that the city acquired the property from Hartman Tree Farm to build the Public Works facility, the city agreed in the purchase agreement to extend sanitary sewer to the Hartman Tree Farm property. That extension hadn't occurred yet, and the Hartman Tree Farm property was, when they did the barn project, I think it was, they were informed that their septic system was non-compliant. So I think at the time of the purchase agreement, it was, contemplated providing sewer to the property for development, but now that this property's septic system was deemed to be non-compliant, they do need to connect to the city sewer system. The existing sanitary sewer that's closest to the property is across the street from the property. Trying to zoom in. Right in this location, there's public sewer there that's a lot closer to the buildings that have the failing septic system than if we were to extend the city sewer from the Public Works facility. We'd be extending it from this side of the driveway over to this side of the driveway, and then they would have to make a big long connection to get to their buildings. So they requested that we consider, instead of spending our money to extend the sewer up from the Public Works facility, that we extend it from across Bavaria Road. We obtained 3 quotes that considered both extensions, so a cost to extend the sewer across Bavaria compared to the cost to extend it just into the property line from the Public Works facility, so that we could have comparative pricing of what those different options would cost. And I will jump back over here. So we had 3 quotes to extend the sewer across Bavaria, and we had 3 quotes to extend the sewer just from the Public Works facility site into the Hartman property line. And what then we have included in the packet would be an amendment to the agreement that would provide for the extension to be made, but Hartman Tree Farm would pay the difference in cost. So it costs more to extend the sewer across Bavaria, and they would pay for that increased cost compared to what it would cost the city to just meet the obligations of the purchase agreement. I think that's it.
So one question, literally, the lowest estimate we got to go extend the sewer 12 feet is $30,000?
It's more than 12 feet. So the existing sewer is on the north side of the Public Works facility driveway. So we have to get it underneath the driveway. I could pull up the footages. I don't remember what the lengths are.
All right, so when
but-
you did the cursor on the map, that wasn't, it's much longer than that?
Correct, because
Okay,
of the
all right.
giant,
Nope,
the
that-
giant pointer made that a little bit challenging.
I was gonna say $30,000 for 20 feet is, all right. Council, discussion? Hearing none, can I get a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the assessment agreement and satisfaction release of purchase agreement and award of a contract to Kuski Construction.
Second?
Hang on, let me clarify something just a moment. So, Bob, on this, the award of the construction is, it's not really for us to do, isn't it? Isn't it, Dana, that we're going to allow that much money and that the Hartman Tree Farm is going to have to purchase their own and we'll offset that with the price should we actually proceed?
We actually would be conducting the construction because it's public sewer that we're extending. So they'll have to put their sewer service in, but we are proposing that a contractor under contract with the city will do the work. We don't want a private property doing work in the county right away.
Right, but if we're going to approve this contract, have the Hartmans agreed to that such that they're going to pay the difference and
Yes.
we're only going to pay the 30,000?
Correct.
All right, so this,
You should maybe make it contingent, the award of the contract contingent upon Hartman signing the agreement. Yeah, that's what you're looking for.
yeah. So, again, we're going to have to do this on the fly here.
So can we just?
Is that true? Because we're approving an amendment to the agreement.
For the original purchase agreement, and we're awarding the contract to Kuski Construction, all we have to do is add contingent to the Hartman's
Hartman signing the
paying-
agreement.
Okay,
I accept that friendly amendment.
okay, can I get a second on the friendly amendment? You got a second? All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that's, the friendly amendment and the motion is approved. Bob, that's fine how we did that, isn't it?
Yeah, Mayor, that was smart. I think that's a good catch.
Okay. Next, 6.3. Ann, this is you?
Why is it so hard? Whoops. Okay, I'm getting there for you.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. The item back before you this evening is the Bavaria Trail project that has been in the works for a number of years. If you want to hit the next
Do you want
slide.
your own
Clicker?
clicker?
Can't have the big arrow. So just to give a little background and history on this. So several years ago, the city put together a pretty comprehensive trail gap map, and this is just one of the four of the entire city. The resident surveys that had been done over the years really spoke loudly to the trail system and our gaps that we have in the trail system. So back in, I believe it was 2017 or 18, the council decided to create a trail fund. And money would go annually into that fund with the hopes of getting funding moving forward so some of these trail gaps could be completed. In 2019, the City Council adopted a strategic goal of completing 1 or 2 trails within their planned time frame. And also in 2019, the Parks and Recreation Committee was tasked with ranking all of our, I think there's 12, 14 trail gaps throughout the city, ranking and providing a recommendation to you on those trail gaps and how the order of which they would be done. They had recommended at the time that the Bavaria East Trail be the #1 trail gap to be completed. With that, now we're going to turn to this year, 2020. In the early spring, the council authorized or approved of a contract with Bolton and Mink to complete a preliminary trail design and also a preliminary trail estimate. Also in that spring time frame, the council authorized staff to move forward with the DNR trail grant, which needed to be submitted by, I think it was the 1st of March. So in June of this year, Bolton and Mink did provide a preliminary design, which you see here before you, with a estimate of about $1.13 million to complete the trail. I want to take it back just a little bit more. When we first started looking at Bavaria Trail and doing our CIP, we had gotten some very preliminary engineering estimates, back even in the early 2010s, 12s. Roughly that trail was coming in at about $600,000, and that didn't include engineering fees, any sort of retaining walls, any wetland mitigation that needed to occur. So that was the number that was carried forward in the CIP, was that $600,000 amount for that trail to be constructed. So when Kira was working on the Highway 5 or the Arboretum Area Transportation Plan, Wenk had been looking also at trail connections for that group. So I asked them to complete, and this was early in January of this year, just to give me a rough idea of what they thought the cost would be. And as you can see, it's a pretty wide range of a cost. So I felt pretty comfortable that we were at least heading in the right direction. Obviously, that number came in quite higher than even I anticipated, but using numbers that we had in the past with past projects and with the information from Wenk, I felt pretty comfortable that we were at least going in the right direction. So just to kind of give you an idea of Kira and I worked together to pull some of these costs together. They're historic costs. Some of them are completed and some are estimates. So we went back to the Highway 5 and the underpass into the Arboretum that was done in 2014. And you can see what the square footage cost was at that point. The Cochia Lane trail, which was included as part of the street reconstruction, which really obviously, when they're done together, bring that cost down. Lions Park this year was at $9.29 a square foot. In comparison to the Greencrest sidewalk, again, it's rural section roads, which really cranks that cost up when you start adding retaining walls. So that cost is coming in at about $34 a square foot. And at Bavaria East Side right now is about $20 a square foot. We also got the Arboretum number just as try to get a comparison. They have obviously got some boardwalk throughout their project, which makes their cost at about $91,000 or $91 a square foot. So the numbers are all over the board when it comes to these trail construction projects. So until we start putting some numbers or some engineering to them, we really don't have a good idea of what the final cost is going to be. But a street project or a trail project is much like a street project or another park project. We get some preliminary engineering done. We get a cost. We go to final design and then bidding. And then that's when the true cost will finally come out. So With that, our next step, so this is the preliminary design and preliminary costs. As we move forward with the final design, we will get refined costs. Through this project also, we need to contact and work with the property owners that the trail would be impacted by. And that would go hand in hand with the final plans and specs on this project. The council would then see that price and that cost and then be requested to authorize bid where you're going to get your final estimate. And then construction would occur over 2021 and 22.
So this doesn't count the land acquisition costs, that estimate?
We're hoping that there will not be any land acquisition costs because we're working on keeping it in the right of way. There may be some temporary easement that might be required until we lay the final cost or the final design down. We're not going to know exactly. So, but we always communicate with any property owners that are affected by a project like this.
All right, but at this point, it's safe to assume that based on what we know now, we're not going to have to acquire land?
That's our goal, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Until we get that final design, though, we're not going to know for sure.
Got it. Thank you.
So, so that is kind of where we're heading, and the Parks and Recreation Committee has reviewed this and has recommended to the council that you move forward with a construction over a 2-year period of time. The trail fund, the projected balance, if we do it over a 2-year period of time, you can see in 2021 we would expend money but still have a trail fund balance, and then in 2022 pay the rest of that off, and we'd still end up with a very low trail fund balance. And then looking to the future, our next project, and again, the Highway 5 underpass is at Madeline Creek, and that is going to be contingent on whether the county gets federal funding and whether that project goes or not. But we would have enough money in the trail fund to do that project in 2024 and 25. And then looking further out, the County Road 43 from 11 out to Watermark would be a 2026 project. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have moving forward.
Could you go back to the estimate sheet, the real quick? You had urban there.
Whoops.
On both the east and west side, you've got rural section and upgrade to urban section. What's the difference between that?
So our rural section road is what generally you see out on that road today. There's no curb and gutter. It's a ditch system that's where all the stormwater goes. So within the Bavaria project, in order to keep it within the right-of-way, there is significant retaining wall that is required along a certain portion of that in order to maintain the ditch system versus having it as like Cochia and 78th was all curb and gutter. And so all the stormwater was dealt with through that project that way.
Oh, but by doing that, that's where we avoid having to do any land acquisition.
Correct.
And keep that water under control for the.
Correct. And when you start putting in curb and gutter and storm sewer, this project, and I'm going to take a wild guess here, that project would double if you did a curb and gutter system through that entire road.
Got it.
At least double.
Yep, got it. That's very helpful. Thank you. Council?
My question, I had one question. The trail fund, is that trail fund just being used for new trails, or is that also including maintenance of the current trail?
That fund is only being used for new trail gap construction.
Okay.
And I believe that the Greencrest sidewalk is also being funded out of there. That's the projected
Okay,
fund
I just
to
wanted to
be
make
used.
sure that we
Yep.
weren't not doing maintenance on
No, the maintenance of the trails comes out of the general fund budget.
Okay,
The operative word is gap, trail gaps. This is what this fund is for.
maybe we should put gap on there. Okay. That was my
Council,
question.
other questions?
And if you could go to the drawing where you have the trail in front of the Public Works building?
Where did it go?
Right there.
There,
Where did it go?
Gee,
You going backwards?
Okay. There you go.
I know we have refining to do yet, but you're calling, I'm not sure, if you have two different options there. You have retaining wall in front of all of the public works, or you have the alternate trail route. It seems to me that since we own that land in front of the public works, it would make sense to use the alternate, and I'm just wondering how much of a savings that would be.
Yep, so when I met with Bolton and Menk out on site, when we first started working on the project, I knew that the ditch system, particularly in front of Public Works and also Hartman's tree farm, was going to be very challenging. So one of the things that I had asked them to do was take a stab at trying to bring it up through Public Works and through the Hartman tree farm, which would be not on county road right-of-way. And right at this point in time, the tree farm was not real excited about moving forward with that, but we will certainly look at bringing it up through the Public Works site to reduce the retaining wall costs on
Right,
that.
it seems to me that it would make sense
Yeah.
to keep the retaining wall
There was- yep.
by Hartman's,
Yep.
but then kind of meander the trail.
Yeah, and there was in doing that, there was a pretty significant cost savings
Okay.
For the project by doing that, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree that it's our land, why not use it?
Yep. Yes, we can save some costs, for sure.
Okay. Council, any other comments, questions?
So we're doing the east side of the road or the west side?
East.
East. And does it connect the trail, is there more trail on the other side?
So
Because when I was driving down the road, it was like, I saw the trail on the west side.
there are pieces of trail that are done on the west side. It was through the development.
Yeah.
You'll see that in the Applewood area. And on the east side of Bavaria, anytime that a project comes through, like the, what's the name?
Hill Point?
The Hill Point one, we brought trail from 86th Street up to Alley Lane, or where their property ended, but there is no trail going further north today.
Is it going all the way to Highway 5?
Highway 5, yes. Yep, it's a little over a mile.
Okay, and it goes all the way down Bavaria Road
Yes,
into Chaska?
yes, that piece from 86th, right at the Chaska border, exists today, up to Alley Lane.
I just wanted to make sure
Yep.
that it wasn't like another.
Yeah, no trail gap, this closest one. Yep,
All right. Is there a resolution here?
no resolution,
You
just to move forward with final design.
Deb, yes, no?
Yeah, I make a motion that we move Bavaria Trail project forward to final design.
Thank you. Second?
Second motion.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, we're going to move forward to final design. Thank you. Next item, roundtable. Council, again, this is to bring up subjects that we want staff to spend time in to explore. Council, anybody have anything they want to bring up for staff?
Nothing from me, Mayor.
Judy? Tom G? Nothing? Nothing from me. Reports. Bob?
Mayor, I have nothing, thank you.
Dana?
Just real briefly, Mayor, members of the council, with executing the contract and awarding the contract to Parco's Construction, we anticipate that demo will start tomorrow. And so we will likely be canceling the October 12th meeting. At this point, there are not any agenda items to come before the council. So should we need to meet, we will have to meet virtually. But we will still be open to the public during construction, but the council chambers and the conference room will be not in use, probably through the third week or so in October.
All right, is that confirmed now? You want to,
Mayor, it'll be confirmed as soon as you sign the contract.
Okay. So there won't be a regularly scheduled meeting for October 12th for the Victoria City Council.
That is correct, and we will go ahead and post notice of cancellation as we get a little bit closer, just in case something comes up and we need council to convene.
All right,
But right
thank
now,
you.
the plan is not to have that meeting.
All right, thank you. Anything else?
Nothing else from staff.
All right, reports, Deb?
Just a quick congratulations to Bethesda Cornerstone Village, who had their, they laid their cornerstone this week, and it is a beautiful project, and it is open for leasing and all ready to go. So lovely, lovely property. Congratulations to them, and welcome to Victoria.
Here. Go ahead.
Yes, I went to the afternoon ribbon cutting, and I was able to take a tour, and it is really nice. I'm really excited about it.
Good. Anything else?
No.
Tom G? Tom V?
Nothing.
Just one quick thing. Last Saturday, I was down at the dedication, I guess, ceremony for, it's Westbrook Church on the corner of 10 and 11. Very excited, and just like Bethesda, I want to welcome them to our city and our community, and wish them all the best, just like we wish all the best to Bethesda also. So that's all I have. Any other reports, anything I missed, Dana? All right, council, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second, please. Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.